Hi everyone, and today we're going to talk about why folks make a big deal about the Deep Sailor Moon. Now, as you know, Deep Sailor Moon is at least 31 or 32 years old, and a lot of things that folks make a big deal about are things that we think are good. First, they like to make a big deal about, names like, business names, street names, near names, things like that. And they do. And then not only making a big deal about that, they also make a big deal about the borrowed names. you know, they behave as if, shifting from Danish borrowed names to either, French or Latin borrowed names or Hebrew borrowed names or Farsi borrowed names, or Hellenic borrowed names. And they behave as if everyone should have known all the Danish names. Well, English didn't really borrow as many names from Danish as it did from other speeches, so sorry. Making a big deal about the blood being cut out. I kid you not, they do make a lot of folks in the Sailor Moon followership make a big deal about blood being skimmed out of any fighting there was. And most of the fighting, if there was, tended to be strikes. you know. So at the end of the day, that's what it tended to be. Um, and that's how it went. Now, you might also wonder, what other things do they make a big deal about when it comes to the Deep Sailor Moon? Oh well, I know what they also make a big deal about. The sailor fighters being, kidnapped or taken instead of slain. Yeah, Sailor Moon, you're right about that. They do make a big deal about that. They go, oh, well, they were taken, or, they were slain in every other telling, in the books and the Farseer show and whatever. And that's true. Well, in Deke's world, they were kidnapped, taken, not slain. And when we're getting talking about what they call Day of Destiny or Day of Calling, which in the Viz world and every other Sailor Moon world, it's really a at least a two half saga, which Disney and Deke made into one. And some folks made a big deal about that. And Sailor Moon, I don't know why they did. Also, bringing up Zoisite being a woman in Deke's world tends to rub a lot of these folks the wrong way too. You see, what a lot of these folks forget, or maybe they weren't even born yet at that time, is that there was, at that time, the mindset and the belief, was that if you were doing a show for children and you couldn't have folks that were unstraight, even if they weren't doing anything wrong. It's not like how it is now, where folks are more trusting and open minded of that. Back then, they weren't. And Disney and Deke did not want to lose what deals they did get with Sailor Moon, which in the 4-1 Reichs was, the WB and the UPN deal that they could have lost, and they didn't want to have to take the grounds that that someone at UPN or WB would look at that and say, nope, can't have Zoisite Millikite being, on straight, which in every other take of Sailor Moon, they are straight. So that's why Zoisite had to become a woman. Make a big deal of that. You're right, Sailor Pluto. You're right, Sailor Underworld Trista. The last thing that I will say before I end this film is that these folks out here, make a big deal about it, about Deep Sailor Moon. And how they say it wasn't what Naiko Takaguchi wanted. Well, at that time, the Walt Disney business and Deke Glee, which was owned by them at that time, had some freedoms, and the freedoms is what they did with my show. All right, give this film a like, share it, playlist it, and we'll see you later.